Hello and welcome to the session. So I think we were thinking also of just changing it a bit. We're just going to have a brief introduction of about a few minutes and then jump straight into sharing narratives. And we would actually like some form of engagement with the participants or the audience. And so a bit more time to have that engagement as well. So thank you so much, Irina, for this. In terms of the context, why we're having this conversation, this comes from a collaboration between two particular groupings, organizations, one in South Africa, GOAL, and another in Bosnia and Herzegovina. And this was to essentially find or to have a conversation about our particular contexts and our histories, where we come from, and where the commonalities are, where the differences are, and how we essentially move forward, either together or not. And I just wanted to also just open up the space for Sarah and Emina to introduce themselves. And so if I can give over to either of you, that would be amazing.
Thanks, Izzy. So yes, hi everybody. So just to say, Izzy and I work together in Cape Town in South Africa, and we've been connected with Emina through our involvement with the United Religions Initiative and just interfaith youth peace work in general. And we just found a common kind of starting point of the connections between our different contexts and the learnings that could emerge from it. And so we wanted to use this as an opportunity to continue that conversation and share a bit with you. So I'm excited to chat. Emina.
Thank you, Sarah. So good afternoon from me, or good morning. It depends where are you now. And thank you for coming to this session, and thank you for actually being very eager to see to hear youth voices, because we are very eager to share with you why we are connected, what connects us, because Bosnia in Europe and South Africa in Africa, and two completely different countries, different contexts, but still there's something that is connecting youth and that is connecting us. And unfortunately, not so positive things are connecting us, but actually those not so positive things made us what we are today, and why we are included in Interfaith, and why we are engaged in youth work. Thank you.
Cool. So, I mean, as you can hear, we come from different backgrounds. We engage in youth and interfaith, but there is somewhat of a conversation that needs to be had, and that can be had. And this is just to open up with our narratives. And so it's a space for us to share certain things that you wouldn't necessarily find in the textbooks. I know one of the issues that we had, or questions that we had pondered, was that if you had to think of South Africa and Bosnia and Herzegovina, what comes to mind? And this you would find in the discourse, global discourse, in local discourses. But there's certain things that I think you wouldn't necessarily really speak about. And so hopefully this is a platform in a wonderful way just for us to share those unspoken truths, unspoken experiences, and to see where this takes us. If I could ask Sarah, if you don't mind starting with just sharing any anecdotes or narratives.
Yeah, thanks, Izzy. So I think the point of connection, and it's still sitting with me from what I said in the earlier, but just our histories of in the South African context, our history of segregation, and in the Bosnian and Herzegovina context, the history of conflict and of war, how those histories have continued into our current realities, and are very much connected to what is happening. I mean, globally, I think we feel a real sense of solidarity with the US at the moment with the issues of racist kind of discrimination. But how our pasts really haven't disappeared, I think, is the important thing to say. And that particularly as young people, we're living in these societies where the challenges of our past are still very much present. although not everybody agrees and thinks that's the case, but I think that's what we're here to say. And just a little anecdote. I have a friend's band called Anecdote, and I can never say anecdote correctly. But a little anecdote from me. When I was 16 years old, I was part of a program that brought together young people from South Africa, from the Middle East, from Northern Ireland, and from the United States. And so those are all regions that in countries that have had their own conflicts. But as the South African group, we were really proud to be South African. We thought, you know, we're the Rainbow Nation. We've championed diversity. We know how to do this. And we, you know, we went there waving our flags and all one happy family. And because that's the common narrative, right? That's put out there in terms of South Africa. You overcame apartheid. You're now a democracy. You're the beautiful Rainbow Nation. And we got to this gathering, this camp program that we were a part of. And one of the first activities that we did, our facilitators divided the South African group into our race groups. So they said, as white kids, you go over there, as black kids, you go over there, as colored kids, you go over there. And I know the word colored has different connotations in different contexts, but just to say that's Izzy can speak more to that, of what it means in a South African context. So we were divided into these racial groups and asked the question, you know, what does it mean to live as these different racial groups in the South African society? And it led to an incredible conversation of recognizing the differences of our experiences. And particularly for me as a white South African, for the first time kind of seeing the people who I was friends with had very different realities. And I think that was an important starting point for the kind of journey of transformation and healing and social justice work that the work that I do with Izzy, with our organization Goal, is very much committed to. I'll pause there to give space and then we'll come back.
Yeah, cool. Thank you, Sarah. We could have Emina, if you'd like to take up space and share what needs to be shared.
Thank you. I'm going to share one story also, which is a very personal story, very my story. I was, let's say, deeply involved already in peace building and deeply involved working with young people and deeply outside my own group, because that was like really the toughest thing is, like, you see, you know, going out of your group and hearing the narratives of the others. And that's the toughest thing. Once when you do it, it's a bit easier. But I decided to take participation in one program, which was actually centered around healing, and it was also centered around religions. So it was a program where we were visiting places of suffering of each of the religious groups in Bosnia. So we were very challenged actually to go and see the, you know, coming from the Muslim group and go and see the suffering of the Christian Orthodox, of the Catholics in Bosnia, of the Jewish in Bosnia, and just acknowledging the suffering of those people and acknowledging the victims and just paying respect to the victims. That was like a huge experience, because the whole of my life, I was just paying respect to the victims in my own group because I was taught to do that. And everybody in Bosnia is taught to just pay respect to their own victims. And in Bosnia, unfortunately, we have this practice of competing who has the biggest number of victims, unfortunately. Every time we start speaking about the war, we start competing which group had the biggest number of victims. So I went to this program and there was Al Jazeera filming us, and I gave a statement on the television. And I said what I said to you, that I want to pay respect to victims. I don't care of the name of the religion or ethnic group. And I have a loss in my family. My aunt lost her son, and she told me, I was watching you on the television and I heard what you said. And honestly, I didn't know what to expect. And then she told me, you are right, because I know there's another woman on the other side that also lost her son and she suffers. And that actually gave me such a boost. That gave me such a, let's say, healing, and gave me such a boost to continue my work and actually to be even more exposed and to speak to young people and actually show them that it's much, much, much easier, even though it's painful at the beginning, it's much easier when you acknowledge the victim and when you actually pay respect to the victim and you don't care about the religion, the ethnicity, the name of the victim. And that was, let's say, even though I said I was a part of the peace building already, but that just made myself completely different. And I didn't feel that I'm betraying my own victims because I'm acknowledging victims of the others. And that's something what is imposed to us because we are taught this way. Thank you.
No, thank you so much, Emina. Just 2 minutes from me in just reflecting on what could potentially be said in this specific space. And also somewhat being caught by the conversation in this session before was just protest was just something that dawned on me. And I want to go back 5 years ago. In 2015, I was a part of the Students' Representative Council at the University of Cape Town. I was one of the 17 students who were part of a council where student protests broke out. It started at the University of Cape Town and it spread all over. But I think what was really interesting and wonderful in being a part of that particular space was the understanding that something is happening here that I might not know about. Something is happening here that I'm unaware of. And there was just this blow up of sorts of just student protests all over. And you needed to be with the program. As a young person, this is something that I think you got drawn into. But not only were you drawn into this, there were certain conversations that I think I would not have had if I was not a part of that space. There were certain things that I needed to think about that if I was not a part of that space, I would be oblivious to. And this just spoke to me in a sense of just opening my eyes to the different lived experiences in my own community in Cape Town, in South Africa, but then also having a look at other communities in the world and seeing or not seeing what is happening in those spaces. And so the session before was this idea of same boat or same storm, different boats. And something triggered me where I think it was Lynn or someone who had said, there are actually many storms and different boats or many boats. And that is a thing that is happening. We're not all in the same boat, or we're not all facing the same storm. There are just different boats and different storms. And it's for us to recognize that, but also to ask ourselves the question, well, if we're in this particular situation, what is happening in other situations that I am completely unaware of? And so I find myself going to bed at 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock in the morning the last few days, just being so glued to the screen about what's happening in the US, because it's triggered me in such a way that there's just empathy that I'm wanting to help. I'm wanting to see how to engage, how to move forward. But as much as that's the conversation, it's also how do we move towards healing? This is a wound that's everyone's feeling. And the deeper question is, how do we heal? And I think as a young person in South Africa, we have not healed. And I can see this happening in other contexts, and we aren't healing. And I'm really asking the question, why? And that's something that I'm struggling to answer. It does speak to positionality, it does speak to expectations, it speaks to lived experiences, but contexts are different. And I would like to pause there and maybe open it up if there are any questions or any statements from anyone who is here. And I want to thank Todd and Aline and Lynn and everyone else for being here.
Can I just jump in quick, Izzy, and say
go ahead.
I think there's a real commonality and thread in our story about that longing for healing, particularly as young people. But the hard work and the extent that one has to go to really step into the different contexts, right? And Emina, like you were saying, to really kind of empathize the victim from the other side, as it were. And I also want to just say for everybody who's in this breakout room that I realize there might be contextual gaps that need to be filled, but we intentionally wanted to share with you a kind of deep and personal story, and to encourage you to find out the context of Bosnia and Herzegovina and find out the context of South Africa, like post this, if that makes sense. But like Izzy said, I think we're open to any questions or reflections that might need to be shared at this moment.
So since we're a small group, I invite whoever has a question, maybe not even type it in, but just, oh, there's a question from Aline Chase. The conflict of finding one's voice in the process of healing is something that is hard to balance, but I believe the paths are different and always valid for each person to go through. There's another question from Lynn. Thank you to Izzy for being here and everyone here. I just wish to ask if there's anything more in your hearts to share in the moment. Would like to hear? It felt like I could feel open-hearted sharings from each of you. And I feel there's less in mainstream media of how things are in Bosnia and other spaces. How are people doing there now? What is the need people are voicing now?
Emina, do you want to speak to that?
I'm not sure. Are we having someone, or is it just someone not muted, or someone wants to say something as well?
I think they're not muted.
Well, basically, the Bosnian context is the context of post-conflict society. And I would say it's not post-conflict, it's even conflict society. It's only post-war society. People are just tired, honestly. And young people especially are tired of these nationalistic narratives, of these constant divisions. And people are just leaving because Bosnia is a huge brain drain country now. So Corona at least a bit stopped now people from leaving the country, but people are just so tired. After 25 years after the war ended, we are still stuck in fights who suffer the most, or we are still stuck in the fights of, who's gonna get which part of this or which part of that. So it's still so fragile, and we are still like a protectorate because there's still international community governing there, and because our politicians are still not ready or mature to deal with the situation. And the problem is that this prevailing nationalism is just being abused by the politicians to stay in power for 25 years after the country was ravaged by war. So, and young people are just tired, honestly. So I'm really, really wondering how many people will leave after the borders are open as well. So it's not good. It's not bad because thank God there's no war, but the biggest problem is this pressure that you're constantly having in your heads and you're constantly having from communities. Yeah.
I just also want to apologize, and I want to do a little time check. I think we might be coming to a close soon. So if you all wanted to wrap up, I'm sorry, this is a conversation that should be much, much longer.
I know Todd wants to speak as well.
Todd had something to say.
I think we have a participant, Naomi, whose mic is open. I'm not able to mute her mic.
Sorry, I just wanted to make one quick comment if I could. I came in this room because I've heard what people my age had to say and have said for years and years. I just really wanted to listen to the youth speakers here. And I know you don't think you're young, but you're still young compared to me. Thank you for what you're doing, and I really appreciate all that you're doing in the areas. I live in Canada where the controversy is who's got the best hockey team, so it's not really the same context where we're living. But I really appreciate what you're doing in your own communities, and thank you.
And I just want to chime in and say I found this very inspiring session, and I'd like to just hear a final closing word from the three of you who convened it, if you have one.
Yeah, so maybe I'll just start. I want to bring in Aline's comment about like the conflict of finding one's voice in the process of healing, because I think that's so incredibly powerful. just a struggle that we're all facing all the time. But I know for me, yeah, finding my voice has been part of that process of healing and finding the right way to use it. And I would just say, particularly the message from young people, I think, and in different parts of the world that we're seeing is to use our voices with incredible intentionality and empathy and purpose. Sorry, go for it, Izzy.
I think oh gosh, timing. Just finding one's space in the world. I think, and that deals with a lot of internal conversation, and I think that's where it starts. So can we sit with ourselves and have that conversation? And I think once that happens, we'll be able to interpret the world a bit better.